زن، زندگی، آزادی. زن، زندگی، آزادی. Woman, life, freedom. Woman, life, freedom.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the FCCJ Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan. Thank you for being with us today in person or online. This event is being live-streamed, so please make sure your mobile phones are switched off or in silent mode. FCCJ's Professional Activities Committee organizes press conferences to inform, discuss important issues, and offer different perspectives through speakers and experts in the know, on the ground, and in academia. Today has been exactly 12 weeks since the start of civil unrest in Iran on September 16. The spark that ignited the whole movement was the death of Mahsa Amini, a 22-year-old Kurdish woman, while in custody of the moral police in Tehran for wearing her headscarf improperly on Tehran metro on September 13. The outcry for her tragic death quickly turned into protests against oppression and protesters shouting, as you have seen, woman, life, freedom. What little information we have and the few images we get to see out of the country for the last 12 weeks have been utterly devastating. Citizen and independent media report severe allegations of disregard for human rights and dignity, and violence and threats against the protesters, such as mass imprisonment, confessions taken under torture, rape, and even execution. In the last couple of days, two 23-year-old protesters, Mohsen Shekari and Majid Reza Rahnavard, were executed for the crime of waging war against God, or muharebe, after what human rights activists called a show trial without any due process. How did the situation come to this? Why are the protests continuing despite the tragic loss of at least 500 lives and the detainment of more than 18,000 others? What is unique about the protests this time versus previous times? And how could the Iranian government have responded differently to the protests? Does the violence in Iran affect Japan-Iran relations and those who made their home Japan, like the speakers today? These and other questions are on everyone's mind. We invited 3 Iranians based in Japan and an expert on Iran politics and economy to give us the latest update about the situation in Iran, where they see the movement evolving, and what it means for both Iran and Japan. Just to my right is Mr. Mohammad Ali Bastami. He is an English instructor at a university in Tokyo and holds an MA in English literature from the University of Tehran. Next to him is Sareh Abri, who is a freelance researcher and holds a PhD in medical social work. An expert on community outreach and services, she completed her postdoctoral research at Tokyo Metropolitan University in 2021. Next to Sareh is Ms. Somayyeh Mehri, who is currently working as a preschool teacher at an international school in Tokyo. She too holds an MA in English literature and language from Islamic Azad University in Tehran. And last but not least, to the far right of my side is Ms. Sachi Sakanashi, who has an MA in International Relations from the University of Tokyo and is the Assistant Director of the Institute of Energy Economics at the Japanese Institute of Middle Eastern Economics. Her fields of research interests include contemporary Iranian politics, the energy industry of Iran, and Japan-Iran relations. And she also additionally served as the cultural attaché at the Japanese embassy in Tehran between 2000 and 2002. So we'll hear from our speakers shortly and briefly, and then we'll open the floor to questions and comments. So if I may start with Mohammad Ali Bastami, please.
Yes, thank you very much. In the name of the rainbow's God, thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to be here and to express I would like to express our gratitude to FCCJ for inviting us to this event. A lot of people here in Japan, especially my friends who are from other countries, not specifically Japanese, they ask me, what's going on in Iran? What's happening there? What makes it so different this time? My answer is always the same. It's women. Women are in the forefront, in the front line of these uprising in Iran. The difference between this one and what has happened so far from the very past is this very topic, women. You can see the difference in the slogan that everybody is shouting these days. Woman, life, freedom. What does that mean? The woman in this slogan represents all the problems, all the hardships that women have had so far in this society since 43 years ago, after the Islamic Revolution. Well, let's say the Islamic regime took over and then started oppressing women from the very first days of their victory. They started with headscarves. They started with firing them from different places. They started by humiliating them, by making laws against women. Basically, everything in Iran since the beginning of this regime has been against women. And women now, they want everything back. They have their demands. They want everything that has been taken from them in the past 43 years be back, be given back. That's their demand. That's why woman is in that slogan. But let's talk about life. What does that mean in that slogan? Life is something that the Islamic regime has taken away from people by different means, as if they really have some kind of competition to make life harder and more difficult for the people every single day. As if they are doing it intentionally. They want to know how much people can take it. But enough is enough. People want that life back too. What about freedom? A lot of people say, okay, so these people want freedom to get rid of hijab, to get rid of that mantle that they are wearing. They want to be like Westerners whatsoever. But that's not the case. People are not fighting these days on the street. They're not dying for that freedom to let go of that hijab. That's not the case. This freedom is something that has been taken away from them. Nobody is free to choose. Nobody is free to do anything. Nobody is free to practice their own religion, their beliefs in Iran. Why is that a lot of people have to flee the country simply because they believe in something that they believe in, be it religious, be it social, be it anything else? They are taking away this freedom from people. They want it back. They want it back. And that's why we are protesting. Everybody is protesting. And because everybody is believing that now is time to take all the things that have been taken away from us in the past 43 years to be taken back. And we're not going to stop until we take them back. This is what we are going to do. And I believe that everybody in Iran believes that these days. And they believe this is the time to do it. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for having us today here. Let me clarify what I want to put forward. I don't want to see Japanese media and government having been fooled by Islamic regime's propaganda about abolition of the morality police. Putting an end to morality police is Islamic regime's propaganda for people who have no idea about what's going on in Iran. For those who don't know, since April 1983, Islamic regime made it obligatory for women to wear hijab, and nothing changed about hijab law. Hijab is still enforced. Hijab law is still enforced, and the morality police is just an extra measures to enforce hijab. As we see, one of Islamic regime's parliament member just announced the bank accounts of women who are not wearing hijab properly will be blocked soon. And also, an amusement park in east of Tehran has been closed because after a photo of working without hijab circulated on social media. But there is some reasons that the Islamic regime propaganda like to actually distract people from. First of all, there would be a countrywide strike planned from December 5 to 7 that the propaganda of the Islamic regime would love for you to not know about it. The second one, execution of protesters had been already started to take place, meaning people have been already executed, including children under 18. They use muharebe for these protesters, actually arbitrarily, not for just these protesters, for many people actually on last 43 years of revolution. The last one and the most important one is on December 14, the day before yesterday, UN state members under Economic and Social Council was going to vote on whether or not to remove the Islamic regime from the Commission on Status of Women. Kind of good time for propaganda to be an overdrive, wouldn't you say? Happily, despite they actually did their best, but it wasn't fruitful, and Islamic regime has been expelled from that commission. Long story short, I want to say mandatory hijab and lack of bodily autonomy in Iran always has been one of pillars of Islamic regime. But at the moment, people just fighting for dismantle the whole system. They are very clear. They are noticeably chanting, this is the last message. The target is the entire system, this entire the state. So I want you not to fall for it, not to fall for Islamic regime's propaganda. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us and giving us this opportunity. Right now, Iran is in the midst of a revolution, and this was ignited by the killing of a 22-year-old woman in custody, Mahsa Amini, by the so-called morality police. And the protest didn't stay limited to Mahsa Amini's death. It rather quickly targeted the Iranian government's political and ideological foundations. The protests were violently quashed by the anti-riot police and Iran's militia force, Basij. Batons, tear gas, pellets, paintball guns, shotguns, and other lethal weapons were used in the repression of the protesters. This widespread crackdown has led to the deaths of hundreds of people and the wounding of thousands of protesters. According to news reports, military forces have used ambulances and public transit buses and also food trucks to transport the forces and their equipment. And these vehicles were also used to arrest students at schools and universities. Despite severe communication restriction imposed by the Islamic regime, I try to give a clear and accurate picture of the first 90 days of the protest between September 17 and December 15, 2022. All 31 provinces have been the scenes of the protest in Iran. Human rights activist news agency was able to verify that the 161 cities have held protests in the past 90 days. As of day 90, protests have taken place 544 times. And this includes only protests with at least 30 participants. In addition to 544 mass street demonstrations, 144 universities had protests on campus 615 times. These numbers are the largest protests that Iran has seen after the 1979 revolution. Human rights activist news agency has confirmed directly the deaths of 494 people during these protests. 68 of these are minors under the age 18. The detainees are reported to be 18,426, out of which 3,861 identities have been confirmed. 636 university students have been arrested as well. Islamic regime views any person that speaks out against its system of rules as an enemy of God. It's actually called enmity against God. And if you are anti-government, you are anti-God. So if you are actively protesting for your basic human freedoms, women's rights, which are half of a man, and the right for bodily autonomy, the right for religious autonomy, calling out the dysfunction of the government systems, exploiting the country's resources to fund proxy wars and terrorism abroad. If you speak up against any of these, you are anti-God. And you are waging a war on God and causing corruption on earth. And these are actual charges that are punishable by death under the Islamic regime. The Islamic regime continues its murderous methods of the past 40 years of killing, oppressing, and arresting peaceful protesters. On December 8, 2022, the Islamic regime hanged 23-year-old Mohsen Shekari after a secret trial in Iran's revolutionary court by the crime of moharebe, as my friends mentioned, or waging war against God. 4 days later, in defiance of international condemnations of Shakari's execution, they publicly hanged 23-year-old Majid Reza Rahnavard in the holy city of Mashhad. Iranian authorities left Rahnavard's bound body on public display, hanging by his neck on a construction crane. 33 confirmed individuals, including 3 teenagers, have been sentenced to death. I will read the name of 15 of them in the imminent danger of executions. This is a time-sensitive issue, and I beg you to be their voice. Sahand Nur Mohammad Zadeh, Mohammad Mehdi Karami, Sayyid Mohammad Hosseini, Manucher Mehman Nawaz, Mohammad Burughani, Akbar Ghaffari, Abulfaz Mehri Hossein Hajilu, Mohsen Rezazadeh Qaraqlu, Saeed Shirazi, Ibrahim Rahimi, Mohammad Qobadlu, Saman Saidi, Hamid Qara Hasanlu, Tumaj Salehi, Hossein Mohammadi. This is not the first time the Islamic regime has set up show trials in the middle of or after street protests. And by broadcasting the scenes of such courts on TV and other independent media, it tries to victimize some people and intimidate others in society. Recently, the death sentence of 4 Baluch prisoners was carried out in Zahedan and Saravan. The prisoners in Zahedan didn't even have a birth certificate. The ongoing discriminations for the past 43 years in the province of Sistan and Baluchistan, including lack of proper health services, basic life amenities, or education, due to the fact that they're Sunnis, has made the protests and crackdowns in Sistan, Baluchistan the deadliest. The Islamic regime seeks to terrorize and persecute. The Islamic regime seeks to extinguish and the fire of hope in the hearts of Iranian people. The Islamic regime seeks to escape justice and bury freedom under its dark veil of terror. But we shall continue to act on our duty. We shall continue to be the voice of our fellow Iranians around the world and insist on our collective demands. We hereby demand from international community, including the Japanese government. 2, number 1, the ambassadors of the Islamic regime and their representatives in international organizations must be expelled. Number 2, confiscate all assets of the Islamic regime oligarch and deport them without delay. Number 3, the United Nations Human Rights Council must set aside bureaucratic delays and commence formal investigations in the crime of the Islamic regime without any further delay. Number 4, add the names of the judges who issued death sentences against innocent protesters to the sanction lists. Number 5, the Japanese government recently voted for UNHRC resolutions SS35. Please stand by your vote. And please put pressure on the Iranian authorities to immediately stop executions. Number 6, it is of the utmost importance that the numbers of the Japanese parliament could be addressed directly from the Iranian protesters residing in Japan. We hope that an invitation will be extended in a timely manner to help with this unbearable situation in Iran. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Obviously, if I may say before Sakanashi-san's statement, we are an open platform and we would like to extend our permanent open invitation to the Iranian embassy in Japan to come and address these issues here today and to answer the statements made. So please, Sakanashi-san, thank you.
Thank you very much for having me here today. My name is Sakanashi, and I am a senior research fellow at the Institute of Energy Economics Japan, IEEJ. My expertise is Iranian studies, and I have been watching the recent developments in Iran closely. What is happening in Iran today is really heartbreaking, and it has been really painful to watch what has been reported in the news regarding these developments day after day. I accepted the invitation to make a brief comment at the press conference today as a Japanese researcher because I have been trying hard to understand what is going on and wanted to hear directly from the Iranian panelists how they understand the situation in Iran today. And I think one of the reasons behind the protests in Iran today, I think there are many reasons, and one of them, I think, is economic hardship. And the economic sanctions imposed by the United States have caused many Iranian people to suffer. The US has imposed all kinds of sanctions against Iran since 1979, when the pro-US king, the Shah of Iran's government, was overthrown by the revolution. The US had strengthened its sanctions against Iran in recent years. especially after the President Trump, who withdrew from the nuclear deal, which Iran was in compliance with, to impose maximum pressure on Iran. Eventually, the maximum pressure only made the Iranian people suffer, for the President Trump failed to achieve what he had declared to achieve with the maximum pressure, change the Iranian government's behavior. But the US maximum pressure is really enormous, and Japan was also affected by it. Japan has had good relations with Iran both before and after the revolution of 1979, partly because we are a country dependent on energy import, and Iran was one of the major oil exporting countries in the region. Energy diversification has been the priority in our energy policy, both in kind and origin, and Iran has been one of the important countries for us in stable energy supply. However, we stopped importing oil from Iran following the US withdrawal from the JCPOA. For the President Trump told all oil importing countries, including Japan, that we have to stop importing Iranian oil, and otherwise the US will impose sanctions on us. Our trade with Iran also declined sharply because of the other US sanctions on Iran. Almost all the business with Iranian people had to be stopped because of the US sanctions. Usually business is a mutually beneficial activity, and what we used to export to Iran were for the use of the Iranian people, such as cars, home appliances, medical equipment, etc. But the very strict US sanctions have made it impossible to continue the trade, the normal trade. Now the Iranian people are protesting against the hardships that surround them. And for me, the most difficult question at the moment is, what is the right thing we can do? Or if there is anything we can do in order to stop the confrontation between the government and its people inside Iran. Because the Iranian government has shown us repeatedly that the pressure on them doesn't work, and the maximum pressure has always been met with a maximum resistance. We have witnessed that the Trump administration tried to isolate Iran as much as possible. But the more isolated a country is, the more independent the country becomes in its decision-making and in its behavior. If we know from the experience that the pressure or even the maximum pressure doesn't work, and if pressure actually makes the normal Iranian people suffer even more, what can we actually do? If dialogue also seems impossible, what is the alternative way? That is the question that I have been asking myself these days. I agree that it is very important to raise the awareness of the people, and hope this occasion will play a part in that direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, I have something to add.
Please, briefly, yes?
Actually, I want to add something. What's happening in Iran today, it's a pro-democracy uprising. It's unnuanced to assume that US sanctions or economic hardship pushed people to where they are today. Pumping money to Islamic regime doesn't make it democratic. Doesn't make the state to respect human rights. These are what people want today: democracy, human rights, freedom, equality. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to kick off the discussion and question and answer. So if you have any questions or comments, please come to the stage or to the microphone. We'll be happy to hear it. I just want to go back to the really basics of your everyday lives, without maybe giving too much detail, please, so that we keep the safety of others. How do you each connect with your family and friends in Iran right now, and what do you hear these days from them?
Internet has been shut down, specifically on days that there are calls on strikes or street protests. But people in Iran usually use like proxies and VPNs, but it's really difficult, really hard. Sometimes we have to like call them directly from our phones. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, like, we're endangering their lives in Iran, so it's really hard. And then what we hear from them depends on who we call. If I'm talking to my younger generation family members, they're so full of hope, they're victorious, and we just share this feeling of hope that we will continue to fight till the end. And if I'm talking to the older generation within my family and friends, they're worn out, they're regretful, and they're sorry.
Anybody else?
Well, I second that, actually. I agree that this is usually what happens. And when I talk to my cousin, especially because this is the person I contact very much back home, he usually tells me about what he sees on the streets, about the attitude of the people, about what the police and other security forces are doing. And he always tells me that security forces actually, in many cases, they are not doing anything against people. A lot of them hesitate to beat people up, and they hesitate to shoot people. He tells me usually what he sees on the street. And this is something that we can hope for, that from within the system, something happens that stops the bloodshed. And I think this is something bright.
You mentioned the protesters. Who are they? And because we see very young people here, obviously, and they are so brave, they don't care, they're losing their lives. What do they want? What is the success for them? I think you briefly mentioned, but...
Yeah. Like what Sareh mentioned during her talk, like they want basic human rights. We want freedom and equality. That's why women are on the front line, because they've been repressed, they've been segregated, they've been taken away from everything, from stadiums, from dancing freely, from riding bicycles. Like, you may laugh at this, but these are happening in Iran. If you're a woman, your rights as a person is half of a man. This is true, and this is being observed in Iran. So for the past 43 years, they've been repressed and they've been oppressed. So this is the time, this is the opportunity, and they're very young, and young generation, as they're called them, Generation Z, they're very different. They're very hopeful. They haven't heard a lot about like how things were in the past, so they know exactly what they want. They know what's their deal in life, and they'll fight for this. And they're actually like, I look at them and I learn a lot from them.
Okay. Anyone who wants to say something or ask a question, please raise your hands. You mentioned, obviously, things which are quite alien to people outside of Iran. Women's accounts being disclosed, and people working in amusement park, the amusement park being closed because they're not wearing the hijab, and then, of course, the moral police, the start of this thing, the accusation that this woman was not wearing her scarf. It's no longer, I guess, about the headscarf. It never was. Has the moral police been abolished? First and foremost, let's clarify again. And also, are some politicians in your country maybe willing to loosen this headscarf laws, but they're afraid that allowing even this little change would be very humiliating because it's like secularizing Iran? Do you see it that way, maybe?
Well, actually, as I told before, the morality police hasn't been abolished. And something is important is hijab law. It hasn't changed. Nothing has changed in regards to hijab law. And the morality police has been always one of an extra measures to enforce hijab. About the, you mean?
Politicians, maybe they may be willing to change it, but they are seen as, changing or secularizing or betraying the dawa. Yeah.
I believe, no, they don't want it because hijab always has been one of Islamic regime's pillars, and they don't want to actually make it free for women to whatever they want to wear and to put on. Because I think, in actually my point of view, after yeah. Sorry, could you please repeat? Pardon your.
That part of the question.
Yeah, that part. The last part.
The last part was about could there be some politicians in Iran who may want to change, the headscarf law, but could be afraid that it's going to be betraying the cause or humiliating for the regime?
Well, people now at the moment in Iran, no one asking for a reform for hijab law.
Okay.
They are just want to overthrow the regime and not reform for hijab law.
Okay.
May I add something to
Sure.
that? Basically, it's a matter of face. The thing is that if they get rid of this hijab thing, they have gotten rid of everything else that is based on that. That's the foundation of their existence. That's the foundation of their regime. If they take it away, it would all fall down. Therefore, they're not going to give up. They're not going to back down on that, definitely.
Okay.
And to finish this,
Yes,
sorry,
please.
I need to point this out, that
Please.
reform has always been Islamic regime's propaganda. So when people are very smart now, like we know that whatever comes out in any shape of reform is not people want. So if you see on media, if you read on media that, oh, this has been changed or this is what they offer, we don't want the basic, we don't want the regime. So reform is not what we want. And anything that, when they come and they tell, oh, let's have, like what you mentioned, let's have a dialogue, let's converse about this. This is not possible because we don't want this regime. So reform is not an option.
Okay. Yes, please. Yes, you can come here and please state your name and affiliation. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Irsa Basiri. I'm here privately. I'm not a journalist. I'm an Iranian woman living in Tokyo. I was born and raised in Japan. First of all, thank you so much for making the time and explaining so articulately what's been happening in Iran so far. I'd like to look to the future. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how you see this evolving. Is it gaining momentum? Are the executions, impending executions, do you see that kind of quashing the drive of the people? Or how do you see it kind of, which direction do you see it going? And also, I'm wondering if you see any kind of leader or any type of organization of these protests happening. Is there anybody that's emerging as a potential leader for the future of Iran? Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your question. Well, it's a very good question, actually. It has two parts. First of all, let's talk about the things that the Islamic regime is doing in order to push that excitement and what's happening in Iran. That's not going to work out. That's for sure. I mean, no matter how many people they're going to kill, it's not going to work out. I mean, people get stronger, people get braver, and they want to overthrow the regime even more if they do that. So if they start with executing a couple of people here and there, it's simply, you see, if you look at it, they are actually choosing very carefully who to kill, who to execute. And they don't say because they were against the government. They say something different. They say they put other accusations on them. And because of those accusations, they'll execute them. They are very, very careful about this thing because they are very aware that they're under a lot of scrutiny at the moment from not only inside the country, but from outside as well. Therefore, this strategy is not going to work, and nobody is going to back down. This is totally different, as I told you, and people, they are standing without fear, with a lot of bravery in the front line, and they will defend this to the very last moment. This is for number one. The second part that you're talking about, what we see for the future of Iran, we hope to see some kind of coalition. We hope to see people from different currents of politics, political currents. They get together and they start something at the beginning. Recently, a lot of these things are happening. You know, we don't need a single leader to be to tell us what to do. Every person in Iran and outside, every single Iranian is a leader nowadays. You know, they do something, we see that it works, everybody will follow that. Somebody else does something, it works, they follow that. So this is leadership. It doesn't have to be centralized. It's very decentralized at the moment. And we are hoping that this will continue. We do not need one single person to tell us what to do, what not to do. And we're hoping that in the future, when these mullahs are gone, we will have a coalition of different with different political views, even from people with religious background or religious thinking. It doesn't matter, right? So we want to be inclusive. We want everyone to be involved in the future of Iran, because we will support anybody who wants to build and rebuild our country. It doesn't matter what they're thinking, whether they're atheist, whether they're religious, whether they are political, whether they are not political, whatever. It doesn't matter. What we want is the reconstruction of the country, to put it back on the map as a country with 2,500 years of civilization, great civilization. We want it back. That's what we see in the future of Iran.
And to add a brief, thing to Siamak's description, the mullahs are still there, and no one can predict the exact time of the collapse, but it is definite. Yeah, and
it's a matter of time.
Yeah, they do have the support of foreign states for specific reasons, but they have lost the minimum requirements of rain in Iran.
Yeah.
We have a question, please. Yes.
Takeshi Kawasaki, Independent. What is the status of communication with the Japanese government, foreign affairs? Do you have a sympathizer in the Diet or sort of things? Who is, if so, it's on behalf of whom?
What was the question?
Are there any sympathizers to this protests in Iran within the Diet? I guess anybody can answer, but Sakanashi-san, do you want to address how the Diet has responded, perhaps, to the unrest in Iran?
As far as I know, I don't think the Diet has made any statements regarding this issue, and the government officials, they actually expressed their concerns regarding the Iranian government's approach towards Russia, because there are many issues that foreign governments are looking at regarding the Iranian government's policy. So, well, as far as I know,
They
not
haven't
yet.
made a statement, and no. Sakanashi-san, if I may also ask you, you mentioned, of course, one of the main sources of people's dissatisfaction in Iran is the miserable economy, the state of economy, the result of these brutal sanctions for years from US and its allies, and of course the Iranian regime's determination to influence or exert influence in Syria, Lebanon, and with Russia, and with the employment, I believe it's over 10% or so. So people have both the incentive and, I believe, the time to protest, and little to lose, as we can see how they are protesting despite the 3 months. So how can Iran get out of this dilemma and reintegrate with the developed world? And what can the developed world do beyond criticizing Iran or making them suffer? What should happen for those to start communicating?
I may not be the right person to ask that question.
Please,
because it is an extremely difficult question. But what I think is that it is the Iranian people who decide the future of Iran. And I didn't mean to offend you, the Iranian panelists today, by saying what I said today, because it's really heartbreaking. And even though there might not be official statements, it is for sure that many people are shocked and saddened by what's going on and what we see on the news. But in order to change the situation, what can we do? It's a very difficult question, and as I mentioned in my statement. And so that is why this is a great opportunity, because maybe we can discuss what we can do, because there has been so much pressure, and the pressure has actually sometimes made the situation worse. As you mentioned, Syria and Lebanon. It increased after the pressure, the activity. And maybe it is because of the lack of sense of security of the government. Maybe they think that they need to gain more security by supporting food, support them outside of Iran. I don't know. So it's a very difficult question, and we have to find an answer, together. Not one person has the right answer from the very beginning, because if that is the case, that answer might be tried already, but there has been so many attempts, and still there is so much difficulty.
Let me just ask you then specifically about Japan and Iran. What kind of interest does Japan have in cooperating with Iran? Cooperating, yeah. Any bilateral investments or any humanitarian aid? What kind of assistance?
As I said in my statement, we stopped oil import or investment from 3 years ago when this JCPO, I think, collapsed. And but humanitarian assistance, I think the government has continued, and I think it is for humanitarian purposes. And I'm not sure what the Iranian people think about the Japanese government's humanitarian assistance towards Iran, but as far as I know, it has continued.
Okay.
I'm sorry, we're totally unaware of that kind of assistance. We are totally unaware of that. If there is any kind of humanitarian assistance to Iranian government or to Iranian people, we have no idea, or nobody does for that matter, I think.
We'd like to hear, yeah.
You might have heard of JICA, Japanese International Cooperation Agency, and they are meant to deal with humanitarian assistance.
Yeah, that's true. They work through the government. They work through the Jihad, the Ministry of Jihad, they call it, Jihad Sazandegi. And ordinary people don't see them. If any assistance goes through people, it should go through that ministry. And we don't know how they are actually spending that. We know that JICA is doing that. We have heard it because we live in Japan and we've heard a lot about it. But actually, Iranian people themselves have no idea that this is happening, that Japan is doing this.
Maybe it's not visible, absolutely. I think the Japanese embassy in Iran is actually inviting bids for what they call the grant assistance for grassroots human security projects. So this is open to NGOs, local governments, to support grassroots level socioeconomic development projects. But as you're seeing, the situation is so fluid, so chaotic right now, so it's even maybe more difficult for these kinds of efforts to even take place. Any other comments or any questions? If I may ask you, Sareh, you are also working, or your research was on social networks and grassroots movements, sorry. And I know that, well, first of all, let me read you a quote that I got, and then maybe I will ask my question. It's from an interview about Mahsa Amini, and the interviewee, the person they're asking a question to, is saying she was completely covered and she still died. So I think that's what's shaking about it. Any mother from any religious background, from whatever type of family, I think that's why so many religious families are with the protesters, because that could have been anyone's daughter. So my question is, what would it take these different parts of Iranian, maybe the economic elites who are benefiting from the regime, the very deeply religious ones who don't want Iran to be secularized, what would it take for these people to come together, galvanize, and create the future that you're describing for Iran?
You mean about grassroots?
Yes.
Current grassroots movements?
Yes.
Actually, the current grassroots movements in Iran seeks its way in freedom, in human rights, in equality, and democracy. I believe, whatever that can support these causes will contribute to the victory. And oppositely, whatever demonetizes each of these mentioned elements will be detrimental to movement. I think at the moment, the pressure from below is currently is certainly there, despite the increasingly highly costs.
Yes. So there has to be pressure from below, but there has to be also from the top. The divisions need to be reconciled. Any last-minute questions? Yes, please.
Hello, my name is Tatsuya Sato from Japanese newspaper Asahi Shimbun, and thank you for attending here. And my question is, what is the general opinion about this protest in Iran? What is the percentage of people who are supporting this protest in Iran? I don't know the public survey data was also. I want to know about the percentage of people who are supporting this protest in Iran.
Well, the thing is that we cannot tell you exact percentage of the people who are supporting this, because it's really difficult to say. But what I can tell you, that the people on the streets are from different walks of life in Iran. They're ranging from students, even elementary students, all the way to really elderly people. So it's really hard. But the people who are actually out there and fighting, they're mostly teenagers and very young people, maybe in their 20s and teenagers. But what percent? I cannot tell, really. It's really hard to give really exact statistics about it. Well, the point is that there is a gray segment of the society that is not doing anything yet, and that segment is big. If that segment joins in, which I believe and I hope that they will do in near future, that's the end of the regime, because there's only one possible way to overthrow this government and by coming out by millions and stay on the street until the government is overthrown. They cannot kill anyone. They cannot kill everyone, right? So if there are 1 million people on the streets, that's it. And that's what we are hoping to happen in the near future.
But if you're looking for numbers on Twitter, Instagram, but mainly Twitter, you can follow the hashtag Iran Revolution 2022. There are like surveys and polls to whether people are supporting, whether people are for this or against this, and you can check and see the numbers for yourself.
Okay. We have one question online, and it's looking to the future as well, like Ms. Basiri's question. And this is coming from Dennis Normel from Science Magazine. He is a member of FCCJ. What do our guests think might happen? Could the regime allow a peaceful transition? Could they relax restrictions on women and address other concerns? What are the possible scenarios going forward?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the question. And second of all, it's not going to happen. This regime has shown in the past 43 years that they're not going to back down on anything. They're not going to cooperate with anybody on anything, simply because if they did, that would be the end of them, right? So what do you expect a dictator to do? Do you expect them to come and talk to you? A dictator, his name is on him, right? He doesn't want to talk. That's why he becomes a dictator. And if they wanted to talk, they should have started a long time ago. It's too late for that now, right? So the only way that things can change in Iran is by going. They have to go. They're not going to share power with anybody else. You think the supreme leader? Why the name is supreme leader? Well, the name suggests that he is behind everyone. He is better than anybody else. He's going to share that with anybody else? Of course not. He believes that he is the representative of God on earth. I mean, how is he going to compromise that with somebody else? Of course not. Therefore, there is no possibility of that. Thank you.
And any other closing remarks, please, if there is?
Can I add something?
Yes.
We think people of the world should know the truth about Iran. So it is the job of you reporters and journalists to investigate and to find out the truth and then relay that to the world. So we really hope this press conference would be helping our people in Iran. So please be their voice.
And okay,
Thank you.
sorry.
Yes, please.
And please listen to the people of Iran. Just listen to the people of streets of Iran. They are very clear and they know what they want to do.
And Sakanashi-san, any closing? Thank you. Thank you very much. Of course, again, to repeat our invitation to the Iranian embassy in Japan to come and address these issues, we really are open for conversation. And we thank, for the time being, we thank our speakers today, Mohammad Ali Bastami, Sareh, Abri, Somayyeh Mehri, and Sachi Sakanashi for being with us and giving their thoughts and perspectives. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
As a token of our appreciation, this is honorary membership, 1 year's membership for our club.